The following featured presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Welcome to a special San Diego Comic-Con episode of Star Warsologies, the podcast about science and other academic fields of study seen in Star Wars. I'm one of your hosts, Melissa Miller, and I'm a freelance science writer, and I also write for Star Wars Insider magazine.
And I'm your other host, James Floyd. I am a freelance writer for StarWars.com and Star Wars Insider print magazine. This episode is our last of our three panels that we presented at San Diego Comic-Con 2023. It is Star Wars Andor, Making a Rebel, Making a Rebellion, moderated by moi. This year for Comic-Con, we worked as part of the STEAMpop Network, a coalition of several STEM-focused groups, including the Fleet Science Center in San Diego, the If Then Ambassador Program, and Cosplay for Science. All right, let's dive into our panel.
Hello. Anyway, we're going to get this started here. Welcome to Andor, Making a Rebel, Making a Rebellion. I take it you guys are all Star Wars fans? Yeah. You guys all Andor fans? Woo! All right. I like it. I'm going to introduce myself while we have panelists taking pictures of the audience. It's very exciting. One of the cool things we have is we have a lot of people here that do all sorts of other conferences and conventions. And one of the best things about Comic-Con and Star Wars conventions is you might present to at a physics conference, but physics conferences don't have lightsabers. So.
Yet.
Not all of them, anyway.
My name is James Floyd. I will be your moderator today. I am a freelance writer for StarWars.com and Star Wars Insider print magazine. I also host a podcast called Star Warsologies with my friend Melissa. And we talk about science and Star Wars, or we get a guest expert every time to talk about their field and how it intersects with Star Wars. And of course, our convention panels are also on that too. So if you're not in this room, if you have friends who didn't make it in here or friends who didn't come to Comic-Con, but you want to share this with them, it will be released as an episode of Star Warsologies in about a week or two once we recover from this convention. Let's go down the line and everybody introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Robert Dagnall. I'm a professional educator. I'm a master's student in Rhetoric and Writing Studies at San Diego State University, so go Aztecs. And I'm a first year composition instructor. I'm in training to become the awesome writing teacher that I always wanted to meet for myself and didn't get to. And I'm thrilled to be here in a room full of people that love this material even more than I do. So, wonderful.
Hi, it's so good to see everybody. My name is Dr. Drea Letamendi. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and consultant. I work full-time at UCLA. Go Bruins. Woo! Sorry. And I'm a media psychologist, so I consult with creators, writers. I'm a writer myself. I've written an article called The Path to Rebellion, The Psychology of Andor. You can find that on Fandom, which is one of the places I write for. I also continue to publish articles. My recent article is called Cognitive Behavioral Mindfulness Using Star Wars. And I have a podcast called the Arkham Sessions, which started out to be a podcast all about the psychology of Batman, the animated series. And since we've completed the animated series, we've moved on to other topics like Star Wars and Star Trek. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Desmond Hassing. I'm a lecturer of American Indian Studies at the aforementioned San Diego State University, where I teach classes in the way Indigenous peoples were represented and treated in popular culture in the 20th century, mostly in comic books, film, and radio. I'm also a PhD candidate in the Department of Theater and Dance, where most of my research revolves around how we use culture to help form the thing we are, the self. So I want to thank you for coming out. I also want to let you know the last time I did a panel at Comic-Con, there were 15 people. So we've got a few more this time. I'm very happy to see you.
All right. Oh, okay.
Hello. My name is Jake Rowlett. I'm a PhD candidate in the geography department at SDSU. And I study film and media geographies and how that kind of can have impacts on our real-world spaces. And yeah, very happy to be here. I had the great fortune of speaking on James's Andor panel at Celebration in London in April. And so I kind of thought, I wonder if I will actually have anything new to add to this one. But there's been 2 pretty major labor strikes since we spoke in London. So I think we got plenty to talk about today. So.
I'm Dianne Dotson, but also an forward-going, call me Jendia Gammon. I'm reclaiming my maiden name and using an old nickname, combining my first and middle names, Jennifer and Diane. I grew up in East Tennessee, and the first movie I ever remember seeing at age 3 in 1977, I thought that was Earth being blown up, but it was Alderaan. So these characters have been with me forever, but for now, I am a science fiction, fantasy, horror, and magical realism writer of novels and short stories, and I have a lot of exciting things to come. I also have a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Tennessee, go Vols, and I have been on a panel with James before, and that was a delight, talking about basically the ecology of Star Wars and Attack of the Clones. We've talked about all kinds of things, and I'm just so delighted to be here. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience.
Wow. There we go. I mean, if we're plugging colleges here, I just want to give a shout out to UCSD. That's where I went. Go Tritons. And that is more school spirit I've seen in this room than my entire stay at UCSD. So that is the way, the Triton way. We do want, as Jake mentioned, that there is the Writers Guild and the SAG strikes going on right now, and we are we love the shows that we see. We love Andor, and we support our writers and our actors in their quest for better.
Yes.
They play such a powerful role in shaping what I think is one of the best Star Wars that we've had, and so hats off to them.
Amen.
So let's talk about why do you think people want to resist and or rebel in general? That we'll dive into the show, but what goes on in the brains of people who are tired of it?
You're looking at me.
I don't know. Everybody's this way, so.
When I heard you say that, I transformed those words into why do we want to exist? Honestly, if we're contextualizing that question in Andor, of course we're realizing and witnessing the gradual systemic rise of this oppressive imperial rule, and there are folks on these planets and in these systems that are directly affected by that growing system. And what we get with Andor is a particular focus on somebody struggling in their own unique individual pathway as this is happening. And the co-occurrence of the universe being threatened is in alignment with this individual being threatened. And so I think why Andor speaks to all of us in this room is that feeling of wanting to exist, wanting to belong, wanting to be a part of something, and not feeling a constant vigilance of the self. So it's an incredibly emotional, an incredibly powerful story that actually really kind of aligns the system with the individual.
I think one of the reasons that people want to rebel in Andor, and we don't see nearly as clearly in Star Wars and in the original trilogy and such, but it's not like the Empire gives you a choice. The one thing that the Empire does consistently in the media is they have this kind of pervasive ratcheting effect. Marva mentions this in her funeral speech, that they come for a while and they do business with you and all that, then they recede, then they come back, and eventually they come back to stay. So it's kind of like when rust sets in. I thought that was interesting because she's speaking to a community of people that deal in manufacturing and rust and maintaining things. That the Empire is a progressive machine that gradually invades every part of everybody's life, and they don't ever step back. They don't ever step down. The Empire they only have one method of operating, and that is more and bigger, growing. So eventually, they're going to affect you. They're going to oppress your life as well. And as Vel says, everybody has their own reason for rebellion. The Empire affects everyone in different ways, but it does relentlessly come to your door.
I also think it's interesting that we've chosen to begin the conversation by focusing on those two words, to resist and to rebel. Because for me, a lot of what this show is about, and I think speaks to James's question, is that when the person fighting you is putting forward a narrative that requires you to surrender the self for the narrative to continue, to resist is to persevere. It is a way to naturally complete and continue your own existence. But rebellion isn't resistance. It's a roll of the dice. It's not about protecting your own personal self. It's about attempting to create something better than currently exists. So I do think each of us, as we watch the show, are going to personally decide, as we're watching it carry out, whether or not we'd be resisting trying to maintain who and what we are, right? Whether or not we would be Kino trying to do the job, trying to get it done, trying to be a good boss for his employees, or whether or not we're willing to throw the dice and try for something better. So I think it's interesting we started there, and I'm interested in hearing the rest of the panel's thoughts as well.
Yeah, speaking off of, Star Wars has never really, the terms like rebellion and resistance have always felt just kind of like really great titles for the group, right, for the good guys. And it wasn't really, for me at least, until we got to, Rogue One and Andor that those words all started to get a little bit more meaning. And to throw more R words into it to mix it up, there's resilience, there's reworking along with the resistance and rebellion. It's how do you find your place in this system, and are there actions that you can take that throw a wrench in it? And I know we'll probably talk way more about Nimic's Manifesto moving on, but that all kind of boils it down to me is this idea of, there are people who are already enlisted in the war before they ever even realize it. And that's just, these minor acts of resistance that throw a wrench in. And speaking on the tyranny of the Empire, he says in the manifesto that it's an unnatural rule. To rule like that is unnatural. And so the only way to keep it up is just to pile and pile and pile and just, like we said, take over people's lives to that point. And when that happens, you find yourself where maybe you can't be resilient anymore. You have to resist. And maybe that turns into, open political rebellion. Yeah.
In Rogue One, Jyn Erso says, as she has learned, rebellions are built on hope. And hope is a choice. And when an empire gives you no choice, you can take action, and you always have a choice. You always have a choice whether or not you want to go along with being oppressed, with being abused, with being forgotten, with being less than. No, you have a choice always in how you act, and you have a choice for hope, and you can build a rebellion on that alone, but you can't do it alone. So I feel so much of what Star Wars, Andor, and Rogue One come down to at the day is that all of these people who are possibly some of them unremarkable, they don't have the power of the Force, perhaps. They're just regular people trying to get through the day, trying to make a living, but finding themselves in this awful cloak of darkness and yet making the choice for hope. And hope can be a flame, kind of like in Lord of the Rings with the beacons. The beacons are lit, and the flame is continuing. You keep lighting a candle with more and more flame. You build hope. You have a choice. I feel like that is the basis of rebellion and of resistance, that you have the choice. The choice is for hope, and you must do it.
Yeah, talking about that choice, there's kind of this moral tipping point of like, you get to a point of like, okay, things are bad, the Empire keeps oppressing us, that, the systems are oppressing us, whether, it's because we're alien or because we're women or because we're men or, we're people of color. And at some point we just say, no more, that we're stopping, we're just going to be like, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to, figure out what I can do. But that point is reached at different points in people's lives. Like at what point, one person might say, hey, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. I need to fight the system. We see, Marva kind of converting to it at the end of her life, and it's really amazing to see that there's an older woman character in such a prominent role in Star Wars. And, she gives that message of hope. She tells everyone, hey, wake up. The Empire is around us and it's not leaving. But what is it about maybe what lines different people have? Like, what do you think drives them to say, you know what, I'm okay with a little bit more oppression?
I think the writers of this show are really pushing us towards the metaphor of flame, and specifically flame and fires.
Yes.
So notably, James, when you were talking about Marva, I'd say Marva always had the flame within her. Right? There's not a scene we see her, regardless of any point in her life in the story, where she is not in some state of active insurrection against the government that is around her. She's always had that flame, but she held that flame close. She banked it. She reserved it for her and her own, her people, her family. The show ultimately, I think one of the questions James asked us in our preparatory notes was, why does Andor wait so long? And when I try to answer that question, what I say is that Andor really is already rebelling against this government, but he's maintaining his flame. He's keeping it safe. He's making sure he survives, his family survives, the people around him survive. And the show's about putting him in a place where he sees a fire big enough worth risking his flame for, right? If he decides to participate, he won't necessarily get to survive the conflict, nor perhaps will his people. But the show's about creating a narrative that sells to him and the other characters in the show the idea that rebellion and organized rebellion can work, that there is more to victory in this circumstance than simply survival and perseverance. So I think they want us to think about that idea of flames. So I'd say that we all have a flame like that within us, right? We all find things about the world that we can't stand, but things that we silently accept because the action of going against those laws usually has negative outcomes that we don't want to accept. And all throughout our lives, that flame's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And every once in a while, something happens that gets enough people together to think that they should pool their flame and fight against it. And I really hope as a people we evolve beyond Star Wars, not the show, but the idea of fighting in general, to have those type of disagreements in the least violent way possible. But as the show, I'm sure we can all agree, points out, more often than not they don't. And but I do think that that idea of a flame is something we should think about as we move forward.
Yeah, I would like to complicate it even further and say, I'm a geographer, so for me, everything's spatial, right? Everything takes place in a certain space, and so by the time we get to Marva's funeral and, the brick ceremony, it's like that space is, they described it as a powder keg. It's ready to blow, right? It's this area where people have fired up and oppressed, and the Empire has come and claimed civic spaces and tried to apply new meaning to them. And a big tenet of talking about political geographies and stuff is that there is no such thing as neutral space, especially public space. It's systems of power and control that define what a space means to people in a community, and in a place where your body is, transformed into a brick when you pass and becomes a space of memory. To have that kind of intrusion, it just got hotter and hotter until it finally did, blow with the big fight, the Empire, at the end of the, in that scene. And, the people can be there and the spark can be there, but also there's something about right place at the right time, I guess, is the way to say it, of just like when everything comes together in that kind of like spatial tension.
Yeah, may we all be so badass in our lives that even our dead body is used as a way to fight fascism.
Yeah, the first blow struck against the Empire is with Marva's funerary stone, I believe.
Yeah.
I didn't catch that on my first viewing, but the second I was like, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Dianne?
Well, I just wanted to, if we want to carry the flame, no pun intended, sorry, not sorry. I just wanted to talk about Luthen for a second and how his approach to rebellion is somewhat different from some of these other pathways in which he has given up, as he says, I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. And he's scoured himself out. He's compromised himself, but knowing that in the end, that is the sunrise, and he is the ashes. And from that, the phoenix will come to relight the galaxy on the side of light. So I love his character particularly for that reason. And of course, it's also a nod to the sunrise that Cassian will unfortunately see eventually.
Oh. Too soon. Too soon.
Spoilers.
Sorry, spoilers.
Yeah, no, that's wow.
Can I speak to the fire? So this is not my academic area of expertise, but I've done a lot of disaster response work and trained with San Diego Fire Department. One of the things that they trained us on was what's called the fire triangle. That is that there are 3 ingredients that are necessary for combustion. You need to have oxygen, fuel, and heat. You have to have all 3 or you don't get a fire. And the relevance, I think, with Andor is, in the case of Cassian's journey, Marva's words that get passed to Cassian, something about when he already knows what he needs to know, he already feels what he needs to feel. There's like one more thing, and then he'll become an unstoppable force for good. So Cassian has 2 of the 3 ingredients, but I think in the final act, he learns about sacrifice and he learns about saving others, and he becomes more than self-interested. And I think that's the third and missing ingredient that ignites him and transforms him into an active rebel and the hero or a hero that we haven't seen before.
I think that's a really interesting idea, that the 3 elements, because you can kind of see that like maybe Luthen is more like the fuel, that he's going to get used up, but he's not like the spark the way that Marva's the spark. And so it's like there's different tensions here, and you need all of them, like you say, put them all together, and that's what will make a fire.
Yeah, Luthen is providing the organization. Mon Mothma is the money, but you need that other ingredient. You need that spark for things to kick off. And to me, it's fascinating that the final act, like the battle, it happens at a time that no one anticipates. Everyone's caught off guard by the funeral, like it begins ahead of schedule. And it seems to happen in this organic, unplanned way, creates chaos. And from that chaos comes that spark.
So, going back, we're talking about some different characters. Going back to Cassian is him at the beginning. He, like you mentioned, that later on he becomes more self-sacrificing, looking out for a larger thing. But so at the beginning, is he really resisting, or is he just a thief? That he's trying to stick it to the man a little bit, but he's mostly there to preserve himself and make some money and live and just get by.
My sense is that in the very beginning, he is still developing his sense of self and identity around this bigger sociopolitical universe. He's a scrap worker. He's an immigrant. He's somebody who knows that he's different. He's learned to mute parts of his identity, which in some cases, a lot of us are familiar with this concept of code switching or muting parts of ourselves for survivorship, for safety, for belonging, to kind of know when we can fit in and even blend in, if not be invisible, so that we don't stand out. What I really appreciated about Diego Luna is that he took his role in this way to kind of highlight those aspects of his otherness. He is adrift. He's a thief. He's doing some things that are, yes, about his survivorship, but not exactly the straight and narrow pathway of someone following the rules. But I think that a part of that is he knows that just being who he is going to get him in trouble. And I think we start to learn about this targeted violence and specifically his marginalization when unfortunately he murders those 2 corpos on that wet planet. And I say that because there's some things in the writing that come across during those conversations. They ask him if he swam over there. They are pointing out to him, you don't belong, you're a foreigner. And I see some nods. We have heard these statements before. If you are somebody who's seen as the other, the perpetual foreigner, someone who looks different, someone who has an accent that's not welcomed, we know those different different indignities that we experience. And we see one blatant one there, and we imagine that there are many others that have taught him how to kind of blend in and fit in, but also masterfully how he's able to leverage that mutability. One of my favorite conversations is between Luthen and Andor, and Luthen's just like, how do you do it? How do you get away with, how did you steal this magnificent, difficult to get part? And Andor looks him in the eye and says, I just walk in. I'm not noticed. I don't matter. And so I can take advantage almost of that invisibility and mutability, and I can work through the cultural system in order to survive. And I think those nuances are incredibly important because of who the actor is and how that's portrayed.
I think if I had to think on Cassian at the beginning of this show, he's not a thief. He steals things all the time, but he's not a thief. But he's also not really a rebel because he doesn't know how to resist. The show has, if you watch it several times, you start to get little segments of lines that are really easy to overlook as you begin. And there's a bit of a confrontation between Cassian and Luthen in the shuttle in the first story arc, where Cassian admits to having been in a resistance group and suggests that he was fighting on a planet for 2 years before the whole war was lost by two resistance groups fighting each other. And of course, the scene, you lose that in the scene because Luthen makes fun of him by pointing out he was a cook for 6 months and he survived because he ran away. But he also went there with the desire to resist. And he saw what people thought it meant to fight these bad guys. And what they thought it meant to fight these bad guys was something that just wouldn't work. And even at the end of the season, I think at the beginning of Rogue One, I don't think Cassian Andor thinks of himself as a leader. He often becomes a leader by default because he's the only one around who seems to have a plan, but he doesn't think of himself that way. And so I think the show's about him learning how to be a rebel, right? It's not the same type of rebel that inevitably Jyn will be in Rogue One, but he needs to learn a story. And so when we see him kind of flailing around in the first couple of story arcs, it's because he's just without hope that there is a story that wins. He knows who the bad guys are, and yeah, he's going to take things from them. He's going to gum up the works. He's going to throw, as our philosopher would have us do, throw some wrenches in the machine. And yeah, and if he can make some money and make life better for Mom and the people of his little community, he'll do that too. But that's not quite a thief to me. His primary motivation isn't stealing the thing to make money. That's just a happy side effect of rebelling.
And one thing you just pointed out there, that he'd been part of this, and he'd been a cook, but at the same time, rebellions are built on hope, but they're also built on full stomachs. And you can be a cook and still be a rebel. That you don't need to be a soldier. You don't need to be a saboteur. That even your most mundane things, if you use them in the right way, you're using them for resistance. You're using them. You're using your talents, whatever they are. And I think that's a good lesson, kind of for all of us. That how can we resist and ally ourselves with other people who resist in the same way, and use what talents we have. And at a time when the world's been throwing a lot of stuff at us, kind of a shock and awe attack of moving towards the bottom, and it's like, yeah, that I want to go out and protest this or that, but I also got to do laundry. And and so it's like, how do we keep our morale up? Is that we have people who can step in and take on just different roles.
Can I speak to that for a second? One of the most magnificent things to me in the show was during Marva's funeral, the music, the musicians, marching, rebelling, and playing music at the same time. And we think of military history that, you have drummers, and other musicians, people who can sing, people who can rally, people who can build, and that's just a musician, but look at the power. A cook, a musician, they're all part of the fabric of humanity. And that, of course, that's the most human thing that we can do, is to make art, which is one reason I'm very much against AI, but anyway. That is our oldest technology, is art. So, I love that it's used as a form of resistance in that funeral. It's just a magnificent honor to Marva.
Let's switching gears from the Andors. Let's talk about Mon Mothma.
Oh, yeah.
We see her shift. She realizes, what have I got myself into here? That I'm funding this, but that's now going to start impacting me. It's going to the money trail is going to come back to me, and how far is she willing to go to do what she needs to do?
Well, she's selling off her daughter.
Very far, yeah.
Look how defeated. So I rewatched the series, and then I watched Rogue One again, and I thought, God, she looks so defeated in Rogue One. She looks so diminished. And, you look at this powerful political figure who's glamorous and it's got it all going on, and then quite suddenly realizes that's actually not that important. That the long goal, the sunrise she may never see, might be sacrificing her daughter. And, I think about her path when we first see her in Return of the Jedi, back in the day. But it's just she reminds me of Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings, in that she diminishes herself so that she can move on, so that she can pass her power on to others and inspire them. So that's kind of where I see her arc going, but God, it's hard to watch.
I just put this together just here, but thinking back to her in Return of the Jedi, I think it could often be misaligned as very dramatic acting when she says, many Bothans died to bring
us this information.
But it's after everything we've seen in Rogue One and Andor, it's like it just still hurts to her.
Yeah.
That many years into the conflict, even in Return of the Jedi, this is still very much a personal rebellion for her, and it never gets easier to lose a squadron or to lose your group like that, and we kind of see that weight really forming in Andor, and it just you can't imagine. I would have a stomachache all the time if I had to be constantly undercover in that way.
Yeah.
No one else wants to jump in?
Well,
talk about stomachache.
No. I think I would just say that I don't think how committed Mon Mothma is really the right question. I think in Luthen and Mon Mothma, we have two separate characters who are on a similar trajectory. They're going to end up in a similar organization, but their goals and intentions are quite different. Luthen has decided the conflict is going to happen. The conflict is unavoidable. I'm going to make sure my side burns the other side down. Mon Mothma is, at every moment in this season and throughout most of Star Wars, really hopeful that there's some other way to get out of this. Mm-hmm. If anyone in the Star Wars universe really believes simply killing Palpatine will make it all go away, it's her. There's some fallback position for her where, if we just do this thing, we can get back to talking to each other rather than killing each other. And those are just two really fascinating foils against which to put people. And I think that your take on the show, your personal take on whether or not one of these two characters is more noble or you like them better, says a lot about us individually as people. I prefer Luthen a great deal, but I also don't think I should be president because I do really bad things a lot. Because I think that I can fix problems that I can't fix, and I think that maybe I should just do it because no one's doing it. I'm like the only guy who watched episode 2 and agreed with Anakin, well, someone should make them agree. But I think that show wants to speak to that. It's just that this show on all levels is a fundamentally slow burn. And these burns are going to play out over seasons, we hope. Although in the modern age of Disney, we don't know the answer to that question.
We'll have 2 seasons. I believe that was the original goal.
Yeah, the original. Well, no, but I still think this story can go on after there is no more Cassian Andor, right? Like, I would love to see a show that continues beyond Rogue One, but during the original trilogy. There are other people doing other things as we watch those films. And I'm much more fascinated by the show that isn't about the mythological heroes. I want the one that's about the everyday people in the trenches.
I do want to comment on the stomach ache that Jake talked about. From a mental health perspective, you're absolutely right. All of this constant vigilance and the duality of this, it's a tremendous sacrifice. And I just mentioned how much social intelligence it takes for Andor to kind of, use his identities to work through this system to his favor. But we're also seeing these other characters too, really suffer through these, the need to perform, to actualize their values. And there is, the concept here of getting burnt out from the constant performance, again, whether it's for survivorship or whether it's for this leadership component. This doesn't happen in a day. This commitment could take years, and it does take a toll on the mind and body. I love B2 Emo's little statement when Andor asks him to lie. And he says, "I can lie. It's going to take extra reserves," right? Yeah, and that's true right. It's true for us as we're navigating this system and potentially, again, actualizing our values and the things we care about. We're putting forth a lot of effort, and that two-sidedness or several facets of this can take a toll on our well-being. So I think that's a great thing to point out.
Yeah, especially with Mon Mothma, that she doesn't get to be herself. Even within her own family, that she can't just let it all out when talking to her husband, that they're stuck in very separate roles, that they can't just relax with each other, which makes, I think, for a very stressful relationship.
Yeah. Someone had said about when on my podcast when we started to cover Star Wars, they said, well, keep talking about mental health in Star Wars, but don't make it political. And I was like, it's Star Wars. What else would we be? It's wars. I'm not sure.
Well, remember, George thinks it's about trade policy.
Fundamentally. And so what we're talking about is psychopolitical validity, this idea that, when you're actively involved in the trenches here, in this constant work, your psychology, your sense of self is transformed. It's involved in this. And in some ways, if you're getting to do the things that match your values, it can be incredibly rewarding when you see people that look to you and validate and give you that compassionate care of, like, the work that you're doing is so worthy. I almost wish that I wish that Luthen had a therapist who was like, you are really, kidding. Keep at it. You're doing great. Maybe ease off a little bit and have a self-care day. You deserve it.
Yeah, I'm just imagining him, doing anything other than being his shopkeeper or his rebel leader self. And it's hard to picture, honestly, that he throws himself into both. All right.
Oh, I think Luthen. I think there's a little bit more complexity than that. I think there is deep embedded in Luthen is the case officer's natural inclination to be a social worker, and we see that play out in the scene with Lonnie, and I think it's like episode 9, where he has a mission on that day, which is to let this guy know that you don't get to get out. There's no out. You don't get to have any out.
There's one way out,
right? But he really does take time in that scene to foreground the fact that he takes no pleasure in the position he's putting Lonnie in, and that he does have sympathy for the constraints and the suffering that Lonnie has to go through being a double agent. He just can't allow him to balk or lose his nerve. So I think that, I agree with you. I can only see those two personalities, but I think the rebel leader isn't quite as cold and calculating as you might think he is. He's just not willing to lose the cause over his feelings. He still feels them.
Yeah.
He still expresses them.
Talks about his ego multiple times.
Yeah.
Yes. Boy, and does that man have an ego.
Yeah.
In both personas.
Yep.
And then switching, from someone like Luthen to someone who's more the idealist of we look at Karis Nemec, and he's writing his manifesto, and he really believes. And what is it about his manifesto that really sticks out to you, that or about Nemec himself?
Try. Just remember, just try. And, when we spoke about this in London, it got into some pretty deep Jedi slander. But this is a franchise where one of the most famous lines of the whole thing is do or do not. There is no try. And then the crux, the very ending of Nemec's manifesto is remember, just try. Just put yourself out there a little bit. Do something a little bit off. The machine is built on, constant oppression and pushing people down, and it's the only way that it works. It's it's also the banality of evil, right? It's these cold, calculated office jobs where everyone's got their individualized labor in order to make sure that the machine never runs out and continues to oppress. But it's like, if you can just, throw a little wrench into it here and there, then it maybe eventually it's going to be the last thing you need, and we'll have hit that breaking point, and it kind of overcomes that ideology, that idea. And so that's the thing that always struck out to me, is that because he repeats remember, like over and over in that manifesto, and then it ends with remember, just try. If any of this has brought anything to you, it's just that put yourself out there a little bit and see what it does. Like, to pull from another thing in Jurassic Park, just the velociraptors are always testing the gates to see where where it might not be electrocuted. Just try, just see what happens. And I think that is a really important message, not only for the show to pass on, but also like it hits Cassian at just the right time. It puts him in a really great kind of position to listen moving forward, when maybe he was a little bit more closed off prior to that.
Yeah, Jake, I think you have a point there. And I think that we began this conversation by talking about how much do you have to take before you start to rebel. And one of the reasons that we accept oppression from any type of circumstance, whether it's a job or a government, is because it's become habit to do so. And you don't start rebellion simply by handing someone a rifle and going, go out, rebel, find someone to shoot. You do it by teaching them habits of resistance. And that's what Nemec's speaking to in that. Maybe it starts with someone who works in the ISB offices who just spits in the coffee pot every time they walk by. And 400 days after they do that, they decide, you know what? Someone asked me for a file. I'm going to steal it. And then they do that for a little while, and they move on, and eventually what you have is a full-fledged rebel. So I like that idea of, to try is not simply to make an attempt. It's to start building habits of resistance.
I want to say, I thought with Jurassic Park, I thought you were going to Life Finds a Way.
That's good, too.
That works.
It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
Life or velociraptors find a way. I think that Nemec's manifesto presents rebellion. It's interesting to me in that he casts the Empire as this unnatural, controlling machine that leaks and breaks down and requires a lot of maintenance to function. But it requires constant input of energy, whereas rebellion is like a natural force. It's like entropy. It just happens, and in a sense, it is a product of the imperial machine. The rebellion has the advantage that the Empire has to protect itself everywhere it exists. The rebellion only has to win at a time and place and opportunity of their choosing. So there's an imbalance there that the rebellion can exploit.
And then speaking of somebody who rebels in his own way, Kino Loy, my personal idol, because I can't swim either. No, but he's not a rebel with a big R, but we see him transform. That he goes from just somebody that is like, I'm here to do a job. I'm going to produce, keep the system going. But finally he realizes that, yeah, none of us are getting out of here alive. And then you just like an immediate switch. Andor has been asking, Cassian's been asking him, like, how many guards are there per level? And before he's like, dude, shut up. Don't even ask that. But then Cassian asks again, he's like 12. Like, he has been building this whole life of all this information. But, what about Kino, jumps out at you guys that...
Desmond, you said a great thing about building habits, and that rebellion can just be a thing you eventually get good at. I think one of the habits or just skills that Kino has is that he does have a leadership quality about him. Like, he's able to control that floor and keep people productive and all of that. But it's not until they hit that comms room where he has to realize that those skills are there, they're in him. Cassian says, like, is that the best you got? And he has to suddenly take all of those skills, those leadership skills that he has, and turn them on their head there for a second and completely use them against the very, machine that he had kind of dedicated himself to. And in that moment, he's invulnerable. He's giving the people exactly what they need to hear, and he gets everyone out of there, even though ultimately the outcome is that it's at the expense of himself. There's only one way out, and it's he doesn't have any floaties. So it's like but he has those skills, he has those habits, and ultimately he gets to use them for the cause, even if it's like the very last thing that he did. It's a rebel right at the very end. Yeah.
Well, I like that ambiguity at the end of that episode. I like not knowing what happens to Kino. Mm-hmm. Does some other prisoner take him and put him in the water and help him swim to shore? Does he make it? Maybe, maybe not. Does he decide I can't swim and goes and finds a rifle and just starts going floor to floor to take out as many guards as he can? Maybe. I don't know. We'll never know exactly what happens to him in those final moments, and I think that's great. But I also think that the fire in Kino is at least as hot as Andor. He's just been co-opted by the system, and they found the perfect thing to stop people like him. And eventually, if left in that prison without any of these circumstances, the same thing would have happened to Cassian. It's really easy to resist the system and to fight against it when all you've got to lose is yourself. You take one of those people and give them 100 people to be responsible for, and all of a sudden, all they can think about is all the things that can go wrong. And they turn that fire towards keeping everyone productive and alive. So, I didn't really feel like there was a massive transformation in Kino. The circumstances simply changed. The way we were doing things wasn't going to keep everybody alive anymore. That tactic doesn't work anymore. And so he went with what seemed like the next best idea. And I do think that's why he is so annoyed by Cassian Andor. I see this little fight in his head between his better and worse angel going like, kid, you think I don't want to punch them in the face? Do you think I don't want to punch them? I want to punch them in the face. But he can't, right? If he does that, it's bad for the whole crew, not just himself.
I like that there's an aspect to Kino, and I'm going to curveball here. I'm going to compare him to Hudson in Aliens. They know their time where they're at is almost over. They're almost done with this gig. They're like, okay, so many days left and I'm out. And he keeps repeating that. And that's a piece of hope for those fellas. Kino is wildly different from Hudson in a lot of ways, right? But at the same moment, when there is the only option that makes sense is to fight back, they both rally. They both get it done. They both make a huge sacrifice. We don't really exactly know, what ended up happening, but it was still a sacrifice. We can assume it might not be good, but, and Hudson, of course, paid the ultimate sacrifice and fought off as many of those aliens as he could. So I love that aspect that, there's still that kernel of hope, but it's shifting, right? Originally, it's like, oh, I'm going to be out of here. I'm retiring. I'm whatever. I'm, going on to the next gig. But then it's suddenly like, wait a minute, no, that's a selfish act. That's a selfish desire. I want everybody to get that sunrise. And he just goes for it. I love that about him.
Well, and I think that comment speaks to that at one point Luthen tells Mon Mothma that she says people are going to suffer, and he's like, that's the point, that we have to attack the Empire so the Empire will crack down on us, so that then more people will resist the Empire. It kind of self-feeding system, but that's kind of a dangerous game.
Well, that's exactly what Luthen's Hallcraft is set up to do also, and how he defeats the Imperial Patrol is he's good at provoking Imperial overreach so that they use more power, and that makes the countermeasures work like a railgun and tear apart the cruiser. So what I love about that scene is, to me, it's excellent writing when how a character fights tells you about how the character thinks and believes and everything else you need to know about him.
So I got the little 5-minute signal, but I want to give everyone a chance of why does Andor speak to you? And then maybe if you want to mention your social media handle or something else that's coming up that you want to tell people about that might be cool.
I think for me, I grew up with Star Wars. I was 8 years old in 1977. I saw Star Wars 19 times in the summer of '77. And actually, I'll ask for a round of applause for my mother, who on May 27th, my birthday, 2 days after Star Wars came out, took me and my best friend to a drive-through movie where we watched we didn't know what it was about, but my mind was blown the moment that the Star Destroyer came on screen. We all remember that moment probably. My mother, we begged her can we watch it again? And bless her memory, she sat there and let two boys watch Star Wars a second time back to back, and I'll never forget that.
Go, Mom.
Why But if I wanted to say why Andor, I think, speaks to me and maybe a lot of us, Star Wars is about the Chosen One, and about, and perhaps if the Chosen One and his family had gotten better counseling and some therapy and such, we wouldn't have. Anyway. So Star Wars is about the Chosen One, people that are destined, people that are superhuman. Andor is about everybody else. Andor is people who make choices, and people who make choices for what they're going to fight for, what they believe in, enough to fight for, that will fight to help each other out. And if you take nothing else from watching Andor, take that message to heart.
Where can people find you?
Where people can find me. Terrorizing freshmen at San Diego State University. But I'm on Instagram as at R.A. Dagnall. You Google Robert Dagnall, you'll find me very easily. And if you have any questions, follow-on questions, let's hear from you.
Well, I love lightsabers and the Force and little green puppets. I really appreciated the story of Andor because, if we think about Luke Skywalker and other main characters we've seen, especially Luke, his struggle was about a quest to escape mundaneness, whereas Andor's struggle was, I think, much different. This was about a fight for existence. And it's a story worth telling, and it's a story worth having. You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com. Dr. Drea Psychology is my Instagram. And then I'm doing a Psychology of Star Trek Picard panel tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at the Marriott Grand 12.
Real simple. Star Wars is about political systems, the movies anyways. But I want to know why we accept those systems. Why do we buy into them? And that's what this show's about. And it's a lot more like the book series have been over the years. It's a little slice of Star Wars we didn't get to see in the type of depth we wanted in Rogue One. We get to see it now, and that's a good thing. If you have any questions for me, I'm Resident Obi-Wan on IG because, well, frankly speaking, apparently I think very much of myself. And if you ever want to find Indians in comic books, go to comicbookindians.com. I've put together a wonderful bibliography of representations throughout the golden and silver age of comic books. It's completely free. Feel free to use it.
if I have one takeaway, it's that, you don't have to live vicariously through Andor when talking about rebellion and resistance. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up, how important it is that this show has halted production of season 2 due to the ongoing labor actions of SAG-AFTRA and the WGA, and how important it is to fight for those fair wages and for the value of that labor. And so, I love Andor. I can't wait for season 2, but I'll wait as long as it takes for it to be done ethically and fairly. If you're looking for me, I am at Jake Rowlett on Twitter. I don't tweet very much, but I'll try and tweet more.
Andor means to me hope, as I mentioned before, that, rebellions are built of hope. And I love that the connective tissue of all of these individuals throughout the galaxy that aren't force sensitive. If the force is like the bones of the body, then, everybody else is the connective tissue. And there's hope always, no matter what your station and where you're at. I love that, and I believe that fully. And you can find me at jendiagammon.com or at my alt, jdiannedotson.com. There's 2 N's in Dianne. I have space operas, horror. The Shadow Galaxy is a collection of multiple genre stories. Go get it, and I've got lots of great stuff coming. Find me. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. If you want to find me, I'm at James Jawa on Twitter and Instagram, and then at Star Warsologies for the podcast. We have some cool Star Wars trivia coming up, so stick around for that. If not, one way out.
Can we get a round of applause for our moderator, James, please?
Thank you, James.
Star Warsologies.
Thank you.
Woo!
That wraps up this episode of Star Warsologies. We want to thank our panelists, everyone who came to the panel, and everyone who waited in line but weren't able to get in. We're so glad that you found this episode online. And all of you who gave us great feedback and asked questions after the panel, and for those of you listening now. If you have an idea for a topic for Star Warsologies, or you know an expert we should interview, let us know at Star Warsologies on Twitter and Instagram, or at Star Warsologies, OLOGIES, @gmail.com. And we have a fan group on Facebook. You can interact with us there and ask us more questions. And please also rate, review, subscribe, and share the podcast on your favorite service.
No topic is off limits, even whether a Wampa's mother is called a Mompa. The STEAMpop Network put on 6 panels at Comic-Con 2023, and they'll be online soon. Besides this panel and Melissa's Science of Superpowers and my Indiana Jones and the Nexus of Archaeology, History, and Punching Fascists panel, there was also Miss Marvel and the Power of Representation, Fear and Fungi, The Science of the Last of Us, and Dr. Evil, Scientists as Villains in Pop Culture. You can check them all out on the show notes page, where we'll put links once they're up.
We are part of the Skywalking Network. You can find all of the other great shows at skywalkingnetwork.com.
See you next time on Star Warsologies, and thank you for listening to our Comic-Con episodes. Comic-Con!